What's happening, guys? I hope everybody had a good day. We had some really great stuff in the room. Some big trades. One of my probably top 5 trades of the year on XNet, and it wasn't because it was just one entry, one exit, but rather, really taking advantage of the opportunity that was there. A plus style, high momentum type of name, thick liquidity, and I wasn't trying to be a hero. I guess I can go over that one first, and we'll get into the winners and losers and all that good stuff. So, the main thing for XNet was you couldn't be a hero, right? And if you were trying to, have, the most size for the biggest unwind and all that kind of stuff, then obviously you got ran over. And you likely had a lot of emotional attachment to it. The key for me was to identify a trend. Ignore all of the volume, ignore all the emotion, ignore everything that is kind of meant to distract you, and actually focus on, what's going on. A lot of people can't do that on the 1 minute chart, right? So for me, I can look at this thing and see that we're starting to kind of peak at this level, peak at this level, peak at this level, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. And that's why I was here. And, not necessarily this particular short, but for the most part, I can kind of anticipate where the next level will peak based on, things that typically would happen, as well as price action tape, things like that. So I started in short, and it was definitely difficult out of the open. I mean, this is a 60 million share, outstanding share. I think it's, let me just double check. Float. 33 million float or 64 million float. So I'm pretty sure it's like 60 million, whatever it was. It flipped the float. And, it's, whenever I'm sizing in, I always want to anticipate that it's going to go higher so I stay safe. Every time that I start into a position, I'm always hoping that it goes higher, because then I know I'm positioning correctly. I'm always risking 2 prior levels, because that way if it goes back and retests those levels, then I'm not emotionally attached. A lot of people will jump into something and they're emotionally involved right away. They have too many, they chase it down, they don't have a good average. You name it. And then when it starts to come back towards the top of a particular channel, they freak out rather than potentially adding or something like that. So when they freak out, they panic. And those are the types of people that I try to take advantage of into the offers. So anyway, I'm dabbling, testing liquidity and whatnot. A lot of times I will have more arrows, and you'll see the same thing on ISEE. I'll have a lot of arrows because I'm testing liquidity, kind of seeing how, do I get swiped right away? If I'm hanging out in the offer, how long does it take? And things like that. And on the cover side, I might have one candle to cover the whole thing. I might have multiple candles to cover the whole thing. But each of these times when I dabble in, I don't want to show my hand. I want to slowly get in there and quietly and by surprise. And then when I'm ready to get out, or I think that the trend's going to change, I don't care. I'm not looking to hide anything. I'm getting out, and I'll be there waiting, hidden. And that's kind of exactly what I did today, where I started into this. And I sized in out of the open, it flushed out, and it actually rebounded a little bit, and it stuffed. So I actually scaled in even more, and then it flushed out, and it flushed out once, flushed out twice, and it looked to me like it was going to reverse. So rather than get stuck in some type of rip up, circuit halt, or anything like that, I decided to move on. So I went ahead and covered the flush, swiped the offer on the last bits, and then that was it. So you can see these arrows right here was actually me sizing in on the way down, and then it covered everything into the flush, and then swiped the last bit, Then I started to dabble in, get a feel for how it was trading, kind of anticipating that this is going to rip up. Now, look, this could easily go to 10, right? But in my opinion, in the way in which I traded, given the fact that it's got 60 million shares, it's not going to go straight there. The only way that it could go straight there is in maybe a couple more days where they've churned it and it's like 30 to 50 million shares every single day, but yet the trend is held. Then they might have some buy-ins, they might have some margin calls and all that kind of stuff if they start to swipe it up a buck or two on air. And then hang it out around there and then go on to the next leg, $1, $2. But an intraday move after 60 million shares on Friday and then another big heavy volume day today, it's just unlikely based on probabilities that would actually happen. So therefore, I had confidence in that fact. And so I just waited for the tape to suggest that, we had hit the top. And I may have been wrong. Somebody asked me, what would your stop have been? And, if we had flushed out to 660 and it started to kind of base and started to grind, at that point, I would make that decision based on what's happening, whether I'm going to size down or whether I'm going to stick with it. But we didn't have to do that today because it just came straight down. So, once again, the only place that I size is the same place that I said in the room, right over here. And it was 670s, and I forget the exact wording I used, but let me just pull it up. Instagram. Let's see. I said scaled hard, cover on flushes until confirmation of failed follow through. So that was right at 9:52 a.m., which was right at the top, right here. And so that was 672 and 675. I scaled hard. And so basically I go from, a 1/5 to 1/10 position to, probably 70%, 80% of my position. And then added on, and then covered into the flush. And keeping a small bit on throughout the entire day. So I never was 100% covered after this point. I still had a little bit on because I wanted to start to trade around that core. People always ask me, what do you mean by trading around a core? So if I start in 5 or 10,000 shares and I scale into 20K and I cover down to 5K or 10K, then it ramps up. And then I scale into 20, 30, 50K shares short, and then it flushes out, and I cover down to 10 or 20,000 shares. I'm trading around that 10 or 20,000 share core. If it ramps up and I size back in, it flushes, and when I cover that, I'm covering around that original core. So the key and the difficulty with this is when you scale and you're trading around a core, if the trend continues to head higher and go to highs and highs and highs and highs, obviously you've just done all that work for nothing. So we talked about that on BBBY. We talked about it on, I forget the other one the other day. But two that I had fantastic entries. It was TAL, T-A-L. I had fantastic entries, flushed out, I covered, ramps back up, and fantastic entry, flushes out, cover, and I'm killing it on the quote-unquote killing it. Nothing crazy, but killing it as far as anticipating the tops and the bottoms. But I have this core trade that I'm holding that no matter how great I am shorting pops, covering dips, guess what? It doesn't matter because it's taking all my money anyway. Because, let's just use simple math, for example. You scalp it once, flushes out, you make $1,000. And you're still keeping that 5,000 share core. And then you scalp it again, you make another $1,000. Now you've got $2,000 realized. All of a sudden you're down $2,000, 2,500, $3,000 on your core that you've been holding because you want to eventually be short, but the trend continues to go higher and higher and higher and higher. So you need to be cautious if you are trading around a core and the trend is holding. In this case, it clearly was not. It kept on having failed follow through momentum, which is always good. Every time it ramped up and about to squeeze, had some great volume, great big volume bars, and it rejected. That's what I want to see. I don't need to be the guy right at the top. And even on this one, you can see the top. They did put in a top. I wasn't trying to find the top. I want to see them stuff it. I want to see them prove to me that, holy moly, somebody just unloaded the boat and somebody just shorted, or somebody just covered the farm into whomever just unloaded the boat, and there's probably going to be a trend change. That's what I want to see in order to have the confidence in order to make the trade. So that's exactly what I did, and that's the trade that I took. Flushed out, worked perfect. I was really happy with the trade, and both, even like right here, this is, you really, really want to be patient when you're on the right side. I had about a 650 average on quite a bit of size. And it's the hardest thing to do to cover at 570, because what if it goes to 550 or 540s or 5s? That could be a six-figure trade difference on that 50, 60, 70 cents that you missed out on because you were covering the flushes. But that is the risk that you have to take by missing out of that potential downside if you're on the front side of the move. And granted, yes, we're on the back side of this intraday move, but overall, we're on the front side of the move. So no matter what, it still may not actually break down despite breaking down intraday, if that makes sense. So overall, it still did hold pretty good compared to the prior day, but in the end, we're still on the front side of this move. So if I had not sized down into this ramp, I would not be shorting aggressively into this push. And now I'm replacing these 570s at 630, which is saving me 60 cents per share, which is massive. And, then this is another hard part. Sure, it washed out, but I'm trying to stay on the right side of that core. I don't want to, I just built up back to huge size again, but I don't want to be too aggressive on the short, because what if we start to base at 6 and then we do a second leg and squeeze into the close, right? That's always the risk. So I went ahead and got down to about half size. Once I sized back in, I got to about half size, 1/4 size, and then I went ahead and covered the rest. So overall, just really, really fantastic trades. I really, like, as far as the covering areas, things like that, I was really happy with what I did. And you know what? I put those covers out there. The only time that I missed a cover was this time right over here, this flush, and the low was 606, and I was at 604. Otherwise, I would have been even more aggressive. But that was the only flush out that I missed it by 2 cents. And I knew at that point, I actually took note of it, and I was like, you know what? Normally, I'm very, very good at anticipating where these things flush out. When I don't get my fills, I need to take notice. And so with that said, because it continued to fail, and we got a pretty good top in at this level, at this 650 level, I was confident with letting it fade. But either way, if it started to go, I would have been probably pretty upset, and I probably would have had too much size. I would have been covering at that 650 level if it started to base, because I missed my size down spot over here. So anyway, that's that. That was a great one, and just overall, I was really happy with the trade. PBTS, I wasn't looking to get involved pre-market. Yeah, you can go back and say it would have been nice, but you know what? If this thing starts going nuts, and I'm trying to focus on XNet, starts to pull my headspace away from XNet, I miss an A+ type setup. It wasn't worth it to me. I'd rather wait for a better edge. So a newsletter got in this thing for whatever reason. They thought maybe they could shove it into a halt. I don't know, but I used the word a free look, right? We were given a free look at the opportunity, what it would have done had it started to rally back. But the free look that we were given was a bunch of volume coming in, all kinds of sheep chasing, and the offer didn't budge. So as we talk about all the time, if the offer does not budge, all this volume comes onto the right, onto the offer, where do you think it's going to go? As soon as it downticks, where do you think it's going to go? It's all going to come back to the left, or the bid side. So flushes out, and I went ahead and covered some, and covered a little bit more, reshorted, and covered the rest. Fumbled the trade, should have just left it on, but you know what? Again, you got to protect your headspace. So this was a great trade setup. It was a great opportunity, but I don't want to, have the lack of watching XNet, missing that trade because I'm trying to babysit something on this PBDS. So you always want to protect that mental headspace. So otherwise, ISEE was great. Again, just like I said, I don't like to show my hand, so I slowly get in there and dabble. Overall, fantastic average on this. And again, most of my covers, block type covers. This one was under 170s. This one, again, was under 170s. And over here, I was starting to get that feeling that we might have a Trove style or an AKTX style squeeze. Just because I think they loaned out too many shares today. It's a pretty thick name. This used to be OPHT. And, they can sell paper into the market, et cetera, et cetera. So, everybody knew that it was a short, and when everybody knows that it's a short, what do you think happens? It doesn't break down because everybody's on the same side as you. So I was patiently covering on the bids, and I was getting some fills here and there, but it was difficult. And then I started feeling quite a bit, and as that started to happen, every time I put a bid out there, I would get hit and hit and hit. So I knew that the sentiment was starting to change a little bit, but we just didn't get that breakdown. So, my thought is we probably gap down tomorrow, 150s or something like that. But you know what? Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we're actually 170, 180s, 190s, something like that, and we get a secondary opportunity. So, we'll see what happens with that. But overall, very happy with the trade. I was mostly happy with the fact that, I had sized down. I was really looking to short into this parabolic move, but unfortunately we didn't really get too much. It was just like TROV, where we had nailed that short trade, but they used the twos. You can see the volume associated. They used the psychological number on the twos, squeeze out some early shorts, and overall it was pretty good. Look left to anticipate right. Draw those lines across. You can kind of see that this is that level that's going to squeeze people out. So next we had CLVS. Really wish I had a lot more of this. This would have been fantastic. Got the meat of the move. Ripped up. I added some after the halt just in case it started to keep on going through 4. It didn't, so I went ahead and sold that immediately and then sold the rest. But overall, very impressive hold. I do wish I paid a little bit more attention to it when it went back and kind of rechecked that VWAP. But this is a great example too, regardless of the trade, where say you miss this whole move, and what makes a good entry? Let it come back, test that VWAP. Not even the fact that, you can go back in hindsight and say, oh, this would have been a great entry. But that's not the point here. Point is, let it rebound, come back, confirm a higher low, and then you can risk off of this VWAP. That's a great trade opportunity rather than just trying to find the bottom. Because a lot of times we, put a little bit on, then we get trigger happy, we add a little bit, then it comes down. We would have been right all along, but our entry just sucked. So that's that one. And then, so SPCE, this one I was a little excited about. I wanted flush out on with 1180s as the risk. So, I went ahead and chased it back up just to put on some, just because I was prepared for it. I had a feeling that we could maybe go to 13, 14, 15s if it wanted to go. This was a special purpose acquisition corp, which we've seen many big moves come from. Kern, if you guys remember, and Hunt, and a few others where they create these just massive short squeezes. So I was excited about that potential. So I went ahead and kind of dabbled, added along the way. And my average overall was 1250s. I didn't have too much size because I'd want to be adding, to a winner if I'm going to have any big size. So it started to come back. It swiped back up to the VWAP. I liked that move. That made me think, oh, all right, game on. This thing flushed out. It's going to come right back. And ended up staying heavy at VWAP. So I said the hell with it, and I went ahead and canned it. So I basically took a loss from a 1250, I think it was 1255 average, to about 1210, 1205. And then immediately regretted selling because it went back up to 1225. And then I looked at it just, when I was doing this recap, and I was like, well, you know what? You always have to look at the positive. Even after the fact that I sold it went up, I would have still been in there. It would have been a nasty one. So I'm very happy with the exits on that. Then a couple other trades. SPOT traded this one, minimized for sure, but it wasn't. I put on a small dabble, and dabble to me is just maybe a 5th or a 10th size. Just I know I want to be there. If it goes another buck or two against me, no problem. And so I was in there about 142 and a half. I added some at 142, 141 50s, 140s, and then went ahead and covered the bulk of it at 139 30s. So overall, good trade. Made a couple bucks per share. And a lot of times these things come back to VWAP. You saw that on CLVS as well, among a few others. So that's always a good thing to kind of think about when you're trying to think about what is the potential. These things can definitely come back to VWAP every single time. Only other two trades that I had that weren't anything too crazy. TIF, which again, you notice a trend here, came back into VWAP before it started to head higher. I shorted into the 131s and 130-50s and covered down to about 128. So 129, 128. I covered too many at 129 and change. I think 129.40. Unfortunately, I was down to about maybe half size and then flushed out another buck, but that's all right. And then spot I went after. What next? I'm trying to look at the other one. Last but not least was TTS. The goal was dips versus 180s. And as you can see, I put on a small dabble right here. And had I not done that, I wouldn't have made the good trade, right? So sometimes I'll just put on a small batch just to have it in my positions, screen, just so it's in front of me, so I'm watching it. And then as the trade progresses, then I go ahead and make the trade. So that's exactly what I did. The 180 is scaled into the winner. Kind of failed, so I went ahead and moved on. It went all the way up towards the 2s before it pulled back. I want to keep this one on watch in case it starts to break out towards the 2s in the short term. So that's about it for me. Hope you guys had a great day. We had some fantastic commentary back and forth in the Traders Lounge. A lot of good questions, especially related to the ISEE trade as well as the XNet trade. So it's becoming super, super important to understand this stuff in order to make these trades. Remember, it's all subjective types of feelings. Sometimes I get the question, what was the exact thing that you saw that made you take the trade? Because people want to have that easy answer. Oh, well, this happened, and therefore it was a short. It's never like that. There's always a lot of factors that roll into it, and it's a subjective opinion at the time. And really, you need to also have an eject plan, right? You need to have a ejection point as to where you'd be wrong. So whereas I don't have a hard stop on any of this stuff, I have a general idea of where, I need to see it crack, where I need to see it stays heavy. And if it doesn't, then guess what? I'm sizing down. So, all right, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Pretty in-depth. A lot of discussion on the trades. A lot of ideas as far as things coming back to VWAP, kind of retesting. But we'll have a busy day tomorrow. We have a ton of stuff. BYND was down after hours. Grub was down after hours. Grub is down huge. It was $60. Now it's 39. And MRTX was 80 down, 80 up to 113, down to 93. Went all the way down to 90 and then back up to 93. So thin trader, but this thing is insane. So we'll see what happens, and we'll catch you in the room tomorrow.